Parshas Devarim is always the parsha before Tisha B'Av, Shabbos Chazayin. And we don't have to look far to find the connection. You know that Parshas Devarim is the beginning of Moshe Rabbeinu's review of Jewish history. And there is a recounting of the story of the Meraglim. And according to Chazal, there's a very direct connection between the story of the Meraglim and the story of Tisha B'Av. And the Gemara tells us in Maseches Tainis that the Meraglim returned from their mission on the 8th of Av, and that's when they delivered their report. And that night, which was the night of wailing, of crying, was of course the night of Tisha B'Av. And Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response to their crying was, Atem b'chisem b'chiya shalchinam, you cried for nothing that night, and the ekva lochem b'chiya l'doros, I will establish this night as a night of crying for eternity. And that is why Puraniyos, calamities, befall Klal Yisrael on Tisha B'Av, the Churban Bayis Rishon, the Churban Bayis Sheni. It's all a consequence of the story of the Meraglim. So Parshas Devarim, which is a recounting, a review of the story of the Meraglim, it's not far-fetched to understand that that is the connection between the Parsha and the Tisha B'Av. Now this Maimer Chazal requires some understanding. Many Svarim, many Mefarshim, try to find a link between the Chet HaMeraglim and the story of Tisha B'Av. So for example, the Malbim, in his commentary to Parsha Shlach, says a pshat, which is based on the Yesod that Rabbeinu Yonah says in the Shari Chuli. He doesn't quote the Rabbeinu Yonah, but the Yesod is Rabbeinu Yonah's Yesod. Rabbeinu Yonah says that if a person creates a Chilul Hashem, the only way he can rectify this is by creating a commensurate Kiddush Hashem. Rabbeinu Yonah understands the pasuk, the Chesed ve'emes yichupar avayin, that a sin can be atoned for with emes. Rabbeinu Yonah says that emes is Kiddush Hashem, and that can rectify a Chilul Hashem. The Chet of the Meraglim, of the Dor HaMeraglim, was a Chet which was a Chilul Hashem, where there was a Chet that would lead the Umas Ha'olam, future generations, to have less belief in God's omnipotence. So that's a Chilul Hashem. So how is that rectified? It's rectified by Klal Yisrael going into Golus. The survival of Klal Yisrael and Golus against all odds, that is a commensurate Kiddush Hashem, which is a tikkun of the Chilul Hashem of the Chet HaMeraglim. This is what the Malbim says. And that's why, as a consequence of the Chet HaMeraglim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was geyser, he decreed Golus, to give Klal Yisrael the opportunity through the experience of Golus to rectify the sin of the Meraglim. That's a very interesting thing. Except that doesn't seem to be the point that Chazal are making. The Chazal aren't connecting the Chet HaMeraglim to the Gzeira of Golus. They're connecting the crying to the crying. Atem b'chisem b'chiya shalchinam, you cried for nothing, therefore I'll establish b'chiya l'doros. Let's say, for example, Klal Yisrael would have accepted the report of the Meraglim without crying, without panicking, without an emotional outburst. They would have, in reasoned contemplation, accepted the report of the Meraglim, and they would have made a very calm, judicious decision that we have to return to Mitzrayim, and so on and so forth. It seems from Chazal that Golus would not have been the consequence. It's not the Chet HaMeraglim per se that brings the Gzeira of Golus. It's the Bechia, it's the crying. Atem b'chisem b'chiya shalchinam, therefore there's b'chiya l'doros. So according to the Malbim, there's nothing with the crying. According to the Malbim, it's the Chet HaMeraglim justifies the Gzeira of Golus. But that doesn't seem to be the point Chazal are making. Chazal are saying it's the b'chiya. If the Chet HaMeraglim would have taken place in the exact same way, except they would not have cried, then there'd be no Gzeira. But they cried, so it was b'chiya shalchinam, therefore there's b'chiya l'doros. So it's not a connection between the evil report of the Meraglim or the Jews' acceptance of the evil report. It's the crying. The crying brings the Gezeira of Golus. So how do we understand that? Another question we have to understand that the Gemara seems incredible. Because the Baruch says, you cried for nothing, I'll give you a reason to cry about. I mean, imagine if a parent would deal with his child in the same way. You know, children often cry about things that we consider unimportant. You know, a child loses something which to an adult is insignificant, small, inexpensive, and the child becomes hysterical. Rabbi Eliezer once said that you have to understand that from the child's perspective, his toy boat is the same thing as the adult's ship. It's not a small thing. But as adults, we tend to dismiss our children's concerns. So something which in our estimation is small happens to them and they become hysterical. So imagine the father goes over to his child, you're crying for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. And gives it a whack. I'm going to give you something to cry about. We would call that child abuse. The child is hysterical. You console him, you comfort him, you try to distract him. But you don't say, you're crying for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. Pow! What is the pshat in the Gemara? What is the Gemara saying? You cried for nothing, I'll give you something to cry about. Even a human being wouldn't do a thing like that. So what does it mean when the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that? Furthermore, what is the idea of b'chiyah shel chinam? You cried for nothing. I mean, it's true. In HaKadosh Baruch Hu's assessment, we cried for nothing. But certainly, they did not deliberately cry for nothing. Right? Obviously, they thought that their crime was justified. So how are they held to blame? How are they held responsible for a b'chiyah shel chinam? It's not like they went out of their way. They deliberately cried for something which they knew was nothing. It seems that something in this Gemara requires an explanation. Let's put all that in the back burner for a moment. And let's turn to another set of questions. There's a minig the Shulchan Aruch brings in Siman Tov Kuf Nun Tes that we don't say Tachnun on Tisha B'Av. We don't say Tachnun on Tisha B'Av. The Torah gives the reason because Tisha B'Av is called a Mayed. Tisha B'Av is called a holiday. It says in the Pasuk of Eicha Kara Alai Mayed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu declared a Moed. So Tisha B'Av is called a Moed. So therefore we don't say Tachnun. So this is hard to understand. Even if in some sense Tisha B'Av is Moed, it's certainly a different type of Moed. It's not a Moed like Purim, it's not a Moed like Sukkot. It's a different type of Moed. Now the Pasuk itself indicates that. Because the next two words in the Pasuk are Lishbor Bachuroi. Kara Alai Moed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu declared a holiday to smash my young men. That's what the Pasuk says. But this was a moed for the destruction of the mighty soldiers of Israel. So that's the type of holiday it is. So that's the type of holiday which exempts us from Tachnun. As we say Eicha, we say Kinas. So good, call it a holiday, but it's a different type of holiday. It's not the same type of holiday as Purim, Sukkot, Pesach, Chanukah. So l'chara, this type of holiday, Tachnun seems totally appropriate. So what does it mean? So there is a conventional pshat, which many Sfarim say. I'll mention one say. For the Aruch HaShulchan writes in Siman Tov Kuf Nun Gimel that this idea of Tisha B'Av being a Moed, not saying Tachnun, is a remez to the Pasuk in Zechariah. The Navi Zechariah says that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, the Arba Taniyos, the 4 fast days, will be Yomim Tovim. They'll become holidays. So they're only days of fasting as long as the Beis HaMikdash is not here. But when the Beis HaMikdash is restored, then they'll become Yomim Tovim. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that during the time of the Bayis Sheni, they were observed as holidays. That the Arba Taniyos, during the time of the Bayis Sheni, were observed as holidays. when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed the second time, they became fast days again. And the Rambam brings this Nebuah of Zechariah, and he writes that in Yemos HaMashiach, again, they'll become holidays. So the Aruch HaShulchan says that this is the idea of not saying Tachma on Tisha B'Av. Not saying Tachma on Tisha B'Av is not because Tisha B'Av in its current form is a holiday, it's because we anticipate, we hope, we yearn for the coming of Mashiach, and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, and then it'll become a holiday. But it doesn't seem that this is the Pshat in the Torah. The Torah does not say that this halach of not saying Tachnun is derived from the Nebuah of Zechariah. He says it's derived from the Pasuk in Echav, Kara Alai Moed. And that Moed, the Pasuk says, is Lishbar Bachurai. It's the Moed to destroy our young men. So it doesn't seem that the basis of this halacha has to do with this Nebuah of Zechariah. It seems there is some sense that a Moed, Lishbar Bachurai, exempts from Tachnun. This as an aside, I'll point something else out. That if the source of this minig was from the Nebuah of Zechariah, then the halacha should be in all the Arba Taniyos. We shouldn't say Tachnun. Well, that's not the halacha. It's only Tisha B'Av. And so Gedalion, Asar B'Teves, Shabbos B'Tammuz, we say Tachnun. So it seems that this is a special halacha in Tisha B'Av. It's not a halacha because the Arba Taniyos will become Yom Tov. It's a special halacha in Tisha B'Av. And for the other Taniyos, you say Tachnun. So, what is the special halacha of Tisha B'Av? Because Kara Alai Moed Lishbor B'Acharoi, how does such a Moed exempt from Tachnun? So we have to understand that a person, to understand the idea of Moed, a person is comprised of two different aspects. A person has an intellect, and a person has emotion. There is the mayach, there is the mind, and there is the leiv, the heart, which is the metaphoric seat of emotion. And the truth is that the life of the intellect, if a person was a pure intellect, he would live his life in a different way than he does as a person who is also an emotional being. See, al pi seichel, pure reason, a person's life should be lived on an even keel. Every day, every week, every month, every year should really be lived exactly the same way. Because a person should reason and determine what is the optimal way to live, and then just live that way day in and day out. Just to illustrate this point, I quoted this in the past. Rav Wolbe and Ali Shur write something. It's hard to imagine that anybody in this century could have listened to this and accepted it. But he said to his Talmidim in the Yeshiva that a person should not overindulge in eating, he writes. So therefore, if you have to determine what the optimal breakfast is, so you should experiment. That one day, you'll eat a certain amount of bread. And if you determine that that amount of bread is enough, then you should eat that amount of bread every day for breakfast, day in and day out, and not eat any more. So on a day that you're unusually hungry, don't eat more than that. On a day that you're unusually not hungry, don't eat less than that. That's what you eat. Now, the family is daiti, the only time people ever lived like that was in the Midbar. In the Midbar they ate mon. There was an Eimer local gailas. And this is what they ate every day, day in and day out. So imagine someone in the 20th century, let alone the 21st century, living like that. It's hard to imagine. But when you think about it for a second, you realize that if a person was going to live his life al pi seichel, al pi reason, then that's a perfectly legitimate approach. You decide what is the best way, what is the derech yeshara, what is the straight way, the optimal way, and that's what you do. Day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, and that's how you live. But a human being is not a pure intellect. A human being also has an emotional side. The emotional side wants to experience pleasure, gratification. I heard many times from Rav Hutner, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, a saying, I don't know who he quoted it from, that said, Tanug Timidi Eino Tanug. A constant pleasure is not a pleasure. In other words, the thing can be the tastiest thing, but if you eat it day in and day out and day in and day out, it's no longer pleasurable. It is just what it is. I used to joke that in a shul with a chazan, the davening is never good. It's never bad. It's just the same. The chazan davens with the Yom every week, so it's just the same every week. Says, you go to a shul, you know why someone's davening is good? Because someone's davening is bad. Sometimes you have a Baal Tefillah who can't sing, so therefore on the days we have a Baal Tefillah who's unusually good, the davening is fantastic. But if you'd have the same Baal Tefillah week in and week out, it'll just be what it is. There'd be no gratification, there'd be no indignation. It just would be what it is. Because the person is about regesh, because the person wants to experience emotion, therefore there have to be changes. There have to be opportunities for a variety of experience. Let me put on an interesting thing. Now the Gemara says the Olam Haba. What is the nature of Olam Haba? It's Tzadikim Yoshvim, Tzadikim dwell, Vatraseyim, Barasheim, wearing their crowns, V'nenem Nizav Shechina, that derive pleasure from the radiance of the Shechina. And there was no impression from the Gemara that there's ever any change. Nothing changes. There are no special events, no trips, no vacations. It just is what it is. But that makes perfect sense, because the Rambam says that Olam Haba is the experience of the neshama. There's no guf in Olam Haba. And even the neshama, the only part of the neshama which is nitzchi, which is eternal, is the intellect. That means there is no emotional life in Olam Haba. There is just the gratification of the intellect. So Mamela, it can be the same all the time. And this, by the way, is also the Rambam sheet about Ribono Shel Olam himself. That Ribono Shel Olam himself, because he has no guf, is totally removed from emotional experience. And therefore, every time in Tanakh, where you have an emotional experience attributed to the Ribono Shel Olam, the Rambam says it's only emotional. But in reality, he's totally removed from emotion. Emotion is mukusher to the guf. But we are human beings, and we have bodies, and therefore we experience emotion. Therefore, we have to have this variety of experience. This is the idea of a moed. The idea of a moed is that we are not meant to serve the Ribono Shel Olam the same way 365 days a year. There are occasions which HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up for us to serve Him in different emotional modalities. So the entire day, a regular Wednesday, a regular Thursday, with talis, tefillin, whatever we do. Those days are pretty much the same. Winter, summer, spring, fall. A regular day is a regular day. The special occasions are opportunities to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in unique ways. So, Yom Noraim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this is an opportunity to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Yira. Sukkot, Purim, these are opportunities to serve the Ribono Shel Olam with Simcha. Chanukah is an opportunity to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with thanksgiving, gratitude, indebtedness. Every Yom Tov has a special emotional modality with which we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what makes it a moed. A moed is not a holiday. It's not necessarily a day of celebration. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are certainly mayadim, but we would never characterize them as days of festivity. We don't say Hallel. Yet we don't say Tachnun either. Why is that? Because the idea that you don't say Tachnun on a mayed is not the idea because it's a happy day. You don't say Tachnun on a mayed because it's a focused day. It's a special day. It's a day that calls for a unique type of avodas Hashem, and therefore we don't fall into the regular patterns. We don't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way we normally do it. Because normally, we say Tachnun, we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a list of our needs, our problems, our tzaras. Says that's part of the everyday modality of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Yontif has its own focus, it has its own emotional tone. And Tachnun is inconsistent with that. Right? Tachnun is the regular, the weekday, focused on my own personal needs. So a Mayed is a time for rising above that. I put aside my own personal problems, my own personal tzaras. I'm focused, ach v'rak, on the unique way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu served this day. And that's why there's no Tachnun. Therefore, even Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, which are not happy days, but there's no Tachnun. Because they're not saying Tachnun on a Mayed is not because the Mayed is a happy day and Tachnun is a steer to the happiness of the day. That's not the Nakuda. The Nakuda is that Tachnun, coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and beseeching Him and imploring Him to help us deal with our problems, that's part of the regular mode of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's not part of the special mode of Avodas Hashem that a Mayed calls for. On the Mayed, everything has to be focused on the unique aspect of the Moed. So Tisha B'Av is also a Moed. It's also a Moed. There's also a unique way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is served on Tisha B'Av. And this is, we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're miskarev to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through a sense of loss. Let me explain this with a mashal. Many years ago, I had a visitor, David Gottlieb, from Sameach in Eretz Yisrael, came to visit us, was a house guest, and a woman called me up with a shayla. What was the problem? Her daughter was going out with a young man, who, by the way, she ultimately married, Baruch Hashem. And at this time they were going out, and the daughter did not feel any connection to him. There was no feeling, no positive emotional feeling for him. So the question is, should they break off? Should they continue? So I said, listen, I don't know about these things, I'm not an expert, but I have a very wise person here, and Rabbi Gottlieb, why don't you come and ask him? So the lady came and put the question in front of Rabbi David, and Rabbi David said an answer like this, a very interesting answer. He said that, sometimes the emotional feeling is only experienced when there's a loss. Because when you have something, when it's available, you don't appreciate it. You don't have a feeling for it. When you lose it, then all of a sudden you feel a sense of loss. So the question you have to ask her is like this. It's not whether you like him. The question is, if he would drop you, what would your response be? Would you say, Baruch Shepatarani, Baruch Hashem Mafdot, or would she be walking into walls? Now, I don't know whether the mother got it. I don't know whether the mother conveyed it to her daughter. I just know that ultimately they got married, and Baruch Hashem are happily married. I see them often. But this is a very interesting point, that there are many things in life that we do not appreciate until we lose them. That's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Because when we had a Beis HaMikdash, we didn't appreciate it. We didn't have adequate feelings for it. It wasn't the delight of our lives. It wasn't the focal point of our lives. And we know that that is a situation that cannot continue. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the opportunity to be miskarev to Him through the experience of loss. That something is taken away from us, and then we realize how precious it is. And through the loss, through the feeling of loss, through the Avelos, we become closer to the Ribono Shel Olam than we were before. I'm fond of repeating a vertel from the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar is commenting on the Pasuk in Eicha, which says, Kol mechabdeha hiziluha, that all those who once upon a time praised the Jews, praised Yerushalayim, cheapened it, they belittled it, Kiro ervasa, because they saw her nakedness. So the Gemara says an amazing pshat over here. The Gemara says that when the Oivdei Kachavim went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and they lifted the Pareichas, they saw that the two Kruvim and the Aroin were embracing each other. And they said, look, this is what they have in the middle of their Holy of Holies. The two statues, one male, one female, embracing each other. And this is what they worship. This is what they have in the middle of their whole, such a ostensibly moral nation. This is what they have. So it was a humiliation. It was a chilul Hashem. So the Ritva asks the Kasha, and the Gemara says an amazing thing. The Gemara says that the two Kruvim, the stance of the two Kruvim, was a sign as to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu was inclined towards Klal Yisrael. If the Kruvim were facing each other, that was a sign that Eisim Ritzon Shel Malkum, that Klal Yisrael was doing what they're meant to do, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is favorably inclined. The two Kruvim, one represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the other represents Klal Yisrael. If they're facing face to face, then that shows that things are as they should be. It says if they're turned away from each other, so then it's a bad sign. It shows things aren't as they should be. It's not Eisim Ritzon Shel Malkum, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't bear to look at us. We turn away from him, he turns away from us. It says here, it wasn't only the Kruvim were facing each other, and they were embracing. So, given the symbolism of the Kruvim, we should take that to mean that this was a sign of the greatest closeness to the Ribono Shel Olam. So why was it the time of the Churban? If Klal Yisrael was so close to the Ribono Shel Olam that the Kruvim were not only facing each other, they were embracing each other. So how could that be a time of the Churban? So the Bnei Yissaschar brings an answer to this Ritva's Kasha from the Mezritcher Maggid. The Mezritcher Maggid answers al pi halacha. The Gemara says that Chayav Adam lifkait es ishto b'shar shu yotze l'derech. That a man is mechuyev to show affection, to show love to his wife when he's about to depart on a trip. If he's going away on business, going on a trip. So we can't just call in from the office and say, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be home for supper tonight, I'm going to New York, right? A man is mechuyev to show some affection to his wife if he's going on a trip. Why? Because a woman has a yearning for her husband when he's about to leave. That means that as long as he's home, maybe she does appreciate him, maybe she doesn't appreciate him. You know, most husbands probably don't rise to their wife's expectations. But when he's going away, when she faces the prospect of separation, so there's a tremendous yearning, there's a tremendous hiskashrus. So the husband is mechuyev to respond to that. So it's the same thing. It says Klal Yisrael understood that this is the Churban, and it's going to be a long goal, it's going to be a long separation. And Klal Yisrael, when it faced the idea of loss, when it understood that we're losing the Beis HaMikdash, we're losing that opportunity to be miskasher to the Ribono Shel Olam, Klal Yisrael, which is always metaphorically the woman in the relationship, right? The Ribono Shel Olam is the chassan, Klal Yisrael is the kala. So just like the wife in the mashal has a yearning for her husband because her husband is departing, and the husband has to show affection in response to that. So Klal Yisrael, when it faced the prospect of Churban, the prospect of Golus, the prospect of estrangement from the Ribono Shel Olam, felt this tremendous yearning for the Ribono Shel Olam, and the Ribono Shel Olam responded, and that was the idea of the Kruzim embracing each other. But this is the idea that sometimes something that we don't appreciate when we have it, when we are on the verge of losing it, we do appreciate. And we yearn for it. We want it very much. And that is the idea of what Tisha B'Av is all about. Tisha B'Av, when we reflect on the loss, we reflect on what we had and what we don't have, that is a unique opportunity for being miscarried to the Ribono Shel Olam. Because sometimes that which we feel at times of loss is more intense than what we feel at times of having. And there's a vertical, the Avodas Yisrael, from the Koshnitzer Magid, quotes also from the Mizutcher Magid, and another pasuk in Eicha, which says, "Kol roitfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim." It says all her pursuers caught up to her bein hamitzarim, between the narrow places. So in Pshuto Shemikra, if you're running away from your enemy, and you can't turn to the right, you can't turn to the left, because you're going down a narrow lane, and there are walls on both sides, so that means you're finished. They're going to catch up to you. There's no escape. So it says here that when the Umas Ha'olam, when the enemies were pursuing Klal Yisrael, they caught up to us Bein HaMetzarim. Bein HaMetzarim, of course, became the colloquial expression for the period between Shibbos Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. It's called Bein HaMetzarim. So the Mezritcher Maggid teaches, Kol Roitfeha, all the people who pursue closeness to the Ribono Shel Olam, Hisigua Bein HaMetzarim, are able to achieve it in this period of Bein HaMetzarim. That there's a type of closeness to the Ribono Shel Olam which can be achieved in the period of Bein HaMetzarim, which can't be achieved in any other time. I think that is the meaning of Tisha B'Av being a Moed. Tisha B'Av is not a Moed in the sense that it's a happy day, but it's in the sense that when we reflect on what we had and what we don't have, it is possible to become close to the Ribono Shel Olam in a way that we cannot achieve any other time of the year. And therefore, because it is a unique modality of Avodas Hashem, therefore there's no Tachnun. Tachnun is part of the day in, day out mode of Avodas Hashem. The Avodas Hashem of a Moed is focused on the unique modality. Tisha B'Av has its own modality. It's not a happy day. Right? But it's a day to become miskarev to the Ribono Shel Olam through reflection upon loss. We put aside our personal affairs. This isn't a day to be concerned about my parnasa or my health or whatever is bothering me. That's for every other day. So on Tisha B'Av, it's a unique mode of Avodas Hashem. Taking this a step further, let's talk a little bit about the emotional experience. We pointed out that emotions are very different than seichels. Al pi seichel, we would really be, as we said, on an even keel. We would act the same way all the time. But we yearn emotional experience, and therefore we yearn for variety, for unique experiences, for different experiences. We've said many times in this class the amazing insight of the Piazetzner Rebbe in the Sefer Tzav Zoros, who writes that Nefesh ha'odom hayeves l'sragesh, the soul of a human being yearns to feel intense emotion, and not necessarily joy, even to experience pain and upset is also gratifying in a sense. A person feels uniquely alive when they have intense emotional experience. The much like given in the past is, a person goes to the movies and they see a romantic tragedy on film, and throughout the film the audience is crying their eyes out. It's so terrible. The audience leaves, the film is over, people ask, how was the movie? Oh, we loved every minute of it. Right? And how can that be? The point is that we want to be misragish. We want to feel. So he writes that if a person experiences that emotional intensity in Torah and Tefillah and mitzvahs, then it's very good. He says, but otherwise, there's a very serious problem. Number one, he may seek this emotional experience in things that are cheap. I pointed out in the past, and there are those who disagree with me, but I still hold it, that the passion the yeshiva boys feel for professional sports is not a kosher thing. It may be the most kosher of the vices, but it indicates something which is very, very, very sad. In other words, if Ben Torah can only experience passion when he thinks about the Maple Leafs or the Raptors or whatever, right? If his passion is invested there, that means often that it's not invested where it should be invested, in his Torah, in his tefillah, in his mitzvahs, in the celebration of Shabbos, of Yom Tov, and so on and so forth. In other words, he's seeking a replacement. He's seeking a substitute. So instead of finding that emotional ecstasy in Avodas Hashem, in Torah, in tefillah, and mitzvahs, he's looking for it in being a fan. Sitting in the stadium and swinging something around his head, because our team hit a home run or scored a touchdown or whatever the case may be. It's something which is not healthy. But the alternative, says the PSS, is even worse. If a person tries to do without, then chas v'shalom, Rahman al-Islam, the person can become chayla michayli hanefesh. He can become mentally ill, become insane. Why? Because the soul is not being given what it needs. So we quoted this Maimon from the Piazetzner many times, and we asked, is there a makar, is there a source to the idea? And we pointed out that the Sefer HaChinuch actually says the same yesod on the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. The Sefer HaChinuch says that why is there a mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov? So he writes an amazing thing, and he himself points out that it's controversial. He says that anybody who hears this will agree unless he's a person who just likes to argue. But he recognizes that people will argue on this yesod. He says that a person is constituted in such a way that just like he needs to eat, he needs to sleep, he also needs to celebrate. He needs to experience simcha. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us holidays as opportunities to satisfy this human need to celebrate. That's what the Sefer Chinuch says. Ayin Sham, amazing words. But the point is that he turns the whole idea of a Yom Tov on its ear. He says it's not the idea that because Pesach there was the Yetzias Mitzrayim, therefore we should celebrate, or because Shavuos was a Matan Torah we should celebrate, or whatever. It's the exact opposite. We need to have days of celebration. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu provided us opportunities to celebrate. And if you go into the Sefer Chinuch, he explains that by attaching the celebration to a mitzvah, it's a schus for us. Meaning if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't have made holidays, we'd have to invent them. Because we need to celebrate. Why should we celebrate National Pickle Day? Or Labor Day? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll give you opportunities to celebrate in a way that will be spiritual as well. So therefore, I give you Yom Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. I give you holidays on which you can be Mesameach. But it's not that because of the events of these holidays, therefore we're Mesameach, therefore we have a mitzvah of Simcha. Because we have to have Simcha. Because a human being needs that. So therefore we have holidays. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the holidays because we need to experience the emotions that we experience in the holidays. Not that he gave us the holidays and therefore we experience these emotions. We need to experience these emotions, therefore he gave us the holidays. If we need, as human beings, to become close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through loss, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us an opportunity to come close to him through loss. As bizarre as that sounds. This drive for emotional experience is so strong that sometimes it compels us to the point of irrationality. I'm going to be emotional. Dover be'itai, Right? Today, many people's basements were flooded, as we all know. And our home as well was flooded. So, at the lowest level of our basement, a few things were ruined. Baruch Hashem, in our case, what was ruined? The things that we should have thrown out years ago. But there's this tendency to hold on to things too long. And finally they got soaked. So my attitude was, Baruch Hashem, finally the Ribono Shel Olam is in Mizaka. He compelled us to do what we should have done long ago and throw these things out. There are other members of the family, you would think that their most prized possessions were taken from them. And I think this is an experience that is common to many homes. So the truth is that it's almost irrational. It's almost irrational. Because we hold on to possessions that really have no value at all. They're just gathering dust. We haven't even looked at them for years. And we really should have thrown them out a long time ago, and yet when we lose them, I'll tell you something personal. Maybe I shouldn't. But my wife had some boxes of she teaches music, sheet music. And they got soaked. And these boxes had not been looked at for years. And she says, yes, she would have gone through it, she would have looked at it. So I said, look, you didn't look at it for 5 years, that it's really worthless. She says, no, it's not worthless. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. She says, when the insurance adjuster comes, make a claim that a priceless music collection was lost. See if they accept the claim. It almost is irrational, but the point is that because we are emotional beings. We are emotional beings. And our yearning for that emotional experience sometimes compels us to act in manners that defy rationality. That was the Bechiyah Shel Chinam. That was the Bechiyah Shel Chinam. Now, Klal Yisrael found itself in a situation where there's a problem, a legitimate problem. The Meraglim came back, they reported certain facts for their Eretz Yisrael. It seems that it would be difficult. But in reality, anybody in Klal Yisrael who would have approached this issue purely rationally would have said, no problem. Right? Ribono Shel Olam has given us Mon, he's given us Nana Kavod, he's given us the Be'er, he took us out of Mitzrayim, Eser Makas, Kriyas Yamsuf. He didn't take us out for nothing. Right? This problem is not a problem. It might be not the way we expected. Maybe we expected to be able to conquer Eretz Yisrael through our own efforts. Instead, it'll be miraculous. Okay, it's not a serious problem. But the emotional side took over. And the emotional side, in some perverse way, right, has a satisfaction from feeling the intense experience of fear, of desperation, as bizarre as it sounds, right? The nefesh ha'adam, which is not rational, a heves l'isragish, it wants to feel, and sometimes that desire to feel leads us to behave in ways that are totally irrational. That's the idea of bechiyah shel chinam. It's a bechiyah for nothing. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that I recognize that you have this emotional need. Listen, I will satisfy that emotional need in a way that is not irrational. Because I will give you opportunities to feel that sense of loss, that sense of pain, that sense of even rejection, right? In a way that rather than estranging you from me, will bring you closer to me. And that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu made loss part of the very pattern of Jewish history. Why? So that the yearning for that type of emotional experience, rather than driving us away from the Ribono Shel Olam, as it did in the case of the Meraglim, will bring it closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, as in the case of Tisha B'Av. Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam, and the ekva lechem b'chiyah l'deiros. And that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Because Tisha B'Av is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying that really it shouldn't have been this way. Really, a human being should not have had this need to feel these intense emotions, these intense negative emotions. But if that is the case, if the story of the Meraglim demonstrated that you have this human need to feel in this way, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will give you the opportunity to feel in this way, but in a way that will be constructive instead of destructive, a way that will bring you closer instead of driving you farther away. That's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Because Tisha B'Av is an opportunity to become closer to the Ribono Shel Olam by feeling this intense feeling of loss. I want to point out something. That the truth is, the reason we are so miserable on Tisha B'Av, right, is because we never reach that emotional intensity of Tisha B'Av. In other words, our Tisha B'Av essentially is just, we are dead, we are dull, we don't feel anything. And that is the problem. In other words, if the idea of Tisha B'Av is Bechia L'Doros, the idea that we should have this intense feeling of pain and sorrow and mourning, which brings us closer to the Ribono Shel Olam because we appreciate what we've lost, what do we do when we no longer have that? You know, it's like I point out often that, you know, you go to a yeshiva. Davening in yeshiva is longer than in many shuls. So in a regular shul, davening is 40 minutes. Maybe in yeshiva it'll be 50 minutes. And we think that's a great thing, that mamash our tefillah is so much better. But it's not so much better. This is why. Because like this, if you're not going to daven, then to not daven, you can not daven in 10 minutes. And if you're really going to daven, it requires much longer than 50 minutes. It requires much more investment of emotion than we are willing to give it. So the point is, our davening is just longer. But it's not any more intense, it's not any more ecstatic. It's just 10 minutes longer. And why people complain, I can appreciate. The same thing, our Tisha B'Av, the problem with our Tisha B'Av is that there is no emotional experience. We're somber, we're quiet, we don't smile, but we don't feel, right? And that's why, the overriding emotion of Tisha B'Av is the boredom. So how did the powers that be decide to solve the problem? They created Tisha B'Av entertainment. So now you can go to the movies on Tisha B'Av. You can see this video, and this video, and this video, and this video, and this video. And every organization has a video. And literally from Chatzos on, you can go from screening to screening to screening to screening, and your day is filled, so you're entertained. Okay, maybe it's better than nothing. But Libi Omerli is that's not the point of Tisha B'Av. The point of Tisha B'Av is not to be entertained or even to be educated. Right? The point of Tisha B'Av is Bechia L'Doros. The point of Tisha B'Av is to feel. And if we don't feel, that is why we have the problem. That's why our Tisha B'Av is what it is, and to the extent that we need all these distractions, right, to get us through the day without going berserk. As the Piazesner said, that if we don't have the emotional experience we need, and we're not going to get it somewhere else, then we are at risk of becoming insane. And therefore, I guess we have to thank all the people that sponsor the videos for giving us the opportunity to avoid insanity, but it's not really what Tisha B'Av is. I don't know by whom it is the way it should be. There could be that we're just so far removed and so far gone and so disconnected from the Beis HaMikdash and Eretz Yisrael and Ribono Shel Olam that maybe that's it. That we're never going to feel a sense of loss. But that is, I think, the diagnosis of the problem. In other words, if our conceptualization is correct, then I think this is the accurate diagnosis of why our Tisha B'Av is so disappointing in so many different ways. Because if it's an opportunity to feel intense emotion, that the sense of loss that is equivalent to that which you feel when a loved one dies. then that is an experience that for us is not a reality in our experience. And that is something that perhaps we should be mournful for that more than anything else. In other words, our Tisha B'Av should not be so much to mourn for the Beis HaMikdash, that's to mourn for the fact that we don't feel the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. We don't feel the loss of being in Golus. And for that certainly is there is adequate cause to mourn. But I think that may be our hope for Geula. In other words, if Golus, if Churban, no longer serves its purpose, if it no longer provides an opportunity for coming to the Rebbeinu Shalom, coming close in that unique way, then we just can turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, listen, there's no point. If it's not accomplished what it's meant to accomplish, then halavai, bring the Geula from Heir B'Yameinu, because the current system certainly is not working. So it's time to try something else. And halavai, the Rebbeinu Shalom should answer that tefillah. And next year, rather than talking about the timeless of Tisha B'Av, the Abelos of Tisha B'Av, we should talk about the Yontiv of Tisha B'Av. Right.